Well, good afternoon. The budget forecast came out and it's $1.5 billion. It's a little bit more than where it was, but what it says to us is we should stay the course of the proposals that we're doing. So we talked about the fact that last year we passed a two-year budget that funded everything, and then the reserves are full, and with the rest we said let's give the rest of that money back. We came out with give $1 billion back, and so we're going to focus on that just to highlight the three areas that we're going to keep working towards. One is fully exempting Social Security income. We think that is a huge priority that would benefit many people in Minnesota. They shouldn't have to pay earning that income all the way through, and then suddenly we're going to charge it again. We're one of 13 states to do that, and so we want to do our best to fully exempt that. The second one the technical term is Section 179, but really it's relief on the tax code for small businesses and the agriculture community. When they buy equipment, the federal government allows them to expense it up front. Minnesota doesn't, and so we want to conform to the federal government. That could infuse small business and agriculture with more resources to do the jobs they do. And finally, our third priority was to lower the lowest income tax level. And that helps everyone. Everybody first pays through that phase, and then they go into the next income tax. And the more you make, then you go into the next income tax and pay part of that. But everybody benefits from that, but certainly the people that are on the bottom, that would help a lot too. And so we're excited about this. If it had gone the other way, it just makes it much more difficult. Now we have to work. The governor has some of his priorities, and the House will have priorities, but we want to lay out where our priorities are. The bonding bill is still on track. There's no reason that we can't have a bonding bill that we all agree with. We're talking about trying to set dates ahead of time to actually have a full process. But with the news today, it didn't get any more difficult. I think we have a path to make sure we finish well for Minnesota. So.
Well, thank you all for coming out. Obviously, very good news for Minnesota today. The message for us is, for Democrats and for the governor, is not whether or not we'll have a tax bill, but how big will that tax relief bill be. We've got a $1.5 billion surplus. We've got a structural surplus in the tails. It's time to make sure that we honor our commitment to Minnesotans and give them some of their money back. We're collecting too much from them. That will also be good for Minnesota's economy. It'll help grow Minnesota's economy, which in turn will help bring in additional tax revenue. So it's the right thing to do, not only for Minnesotans, but it's good public policy. Next week, House Republicans will put out our tax proposal. It will look a lot like the Senate Republicans' proposal. We'll be proposing to fully exempt Social Security income from state income tax. Now is the time to do that, and with this surplus in the tails, we can afford to do that and to do it permanently. And we think that's a very, very important thing to do for Minnesota seniors and those who will be approaching retirement age soon. So it's our top priority, and there's no reason now not to do it. You'll also see things like a child care tax credit, and we also want to help our farmers and small business owners who are being hurt by not conforming with that federal tax code. We want to give them the help that they need. So this really is good news, and frankly, we stand united with Minnesotans in wanting to honor and give them some tax relief back, put it into their pockets and their family budgets. So that's going to be our priority. We'll have a press release and a press conference on Tuesday announcing our tax package from the Minnesota House Republicans.
Questions?
What are the big, I'm sorry.
There's more.
Wait, there's
Just
more.
want to give a little fiscal side. I'm Julie Rosen, Senator Rosen, Chair of the Finance Committee, and it's a relatively consistent, somewhat boring change in the forecast, a 0.04% change from November, which is good, but I just want everybody to just caution on making sure that we prioritize our financial and our fiscal responsibilities and not spend beyond our means. It's easy to start thinking about spend, but actually I think hopefully there is a consensus to really just do one-time funding of areas that are special. And we need to do a very strong tax bill. I think that's important. One of the areas that is a one-time funding is the disaster account, which will be coming to the Finance Committee next week. That's extremely important to get some money into that. We have a deficit in there. We need to keep it funded for the potential flooding that's going to happen this spring all over the state. And then we're also going to be passing out from the Finance Committee to the floor the Rural Finance Authority bill for bonding up to 50 million, another very, very important piece. And of course, as the majority leader and the minority leader said, we're going to do a reasonable bonding bill. So with that, I want to just send out a signal to all the agencies. Just because we have a surplus doesn't mean we stop on our reforms, and there are accountability on how we're spending the taxpayers' money. I think that's extremely important. We have to keep in mind too of the volatile market news recently with the virus that's happening, and so we should be cautious, and we should keep those reserves that we have in place fully funded going forward.
Questions?
Speaker House already said that you can't afford the size of the tax cuts you want to do.
Well, they typically, we focus on controlling spending, and if you control spending, then you can afford to give tax relief back the way we're describing. And so that's going to be the great debate, but we do think we can afford it.
What's going to be the legislative response to the potential of the coronavirus outbreak that's spreading? I know that Senator Ralph has introduced legislation to infuse $5 million into an account, but just wondered, given the uncertainty over that in the forecast race today, what should legislators be doing?
I mean, frankly, that's a good, very good question. And the fact that Senator Ralph is carrying $5 million for resources, we're saying, let's just be prepared. I've met with the governor and the speaker as far as what is the Minnesota response going to be, but we feel like there should be resources available, so we're going to lead on that.
Yes, there is a recent news about a potential outbreak in Minnesota recently, and I believe Senator Benson is meeting with the commissioner and the state. She's been talking with the state epidemiologist extensively. We are going to have a hearing on this next week, along with the $5 million from the Senator Ralph's bill. There is potential of funding from the feds, I think over $2 billion, the president mentioned. So I believe, along with the governor's initiative, we're on the right course, but the Senate Republicans absolutely are taking this very serious.
To follow up, how quickly do you anticipate some of those bills might pass, given just how quickly the situation's unfolding?
That's a very good question. I think we could be very nimble. If we have to spend that money immediately, as something like the disaster account, we could take it to the floor right away.
Let me add one more thing. One more thing on the coronavirus too is Minnesota is more prepared than other places. I mean, we have facilities already in place as a result of SARS. Like I said, the governor and myself and the speaker and both minority leaders had a conversation about this, so we're aware of it and we're proactive, and I think that's good for Minnesota.
What about the numbers now? They're 20 days old, so that's before quite a bit of this coronavirus spread. Are you concerned that the numbers really aren't accurate because of that?
Well, the numbers are growing, which means we want to be precautionary about this. We also want to give a sense of calmness. I don't think.
the budget forecast.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Forecast
Sorry.
numbers, being that they're
Yeah.
20 days old, I don't know how much they.
I
have
thought we were talking
Corona.
about the CDC.
corona-
Yeah.
Yeah, virus, yeah.
So start over and repeat it as for the budget.
Budget forecast
Yeah.
numbers are based from 20 days ago, so
Yeah.
they don't have the last few weeks of the coronavirus spread and some of the economic impact in that. So I wonder if that increases your
Yeah.
concern and the volatility.
I do not think it would change it dramatically. We had a conversation about that with the governor's staff. There's a number of variables that they consider when they look at the risk. And so I think we're on the right path with where we should be. Typically, they're conservative in how they make their decisions, and I think we're in a good spot.
Senator, not to get ahead of the game, but I asked the speaker today what an end of session deal might look like, meaning, will there have to be some sort of tax relief in it?
She said yes,
addition?
right?
And she said yes.
Yeah,
She said,
so we're good.
Well, she said what you often said, what you had divided government, there has to be something in that makes them happy and something in that makes you happy.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, will there be some spending in it as well, along the lines of what the House is looking at?
So very good question, and already the fact that our finance chair, Julie Rosen, talked about the fact that we're doing disaster relief. What was the second one?
The RFA.
Yeah, so we're doing two things right away. Those are already spending issues that we're agreeing on and moving forward. As we find those, we'll move them forward.
Well, I think she means more than the things that everyone appears to agree on, things like broadband and RFA and disaster relief.
We got to agree on them first, and, you know, so these are things that we were actually have agreed to for spending. They've talked about 179 as a possibility, and, you know, this is where we have to move the pieces together that we can all agree on, but the fact that we're communicating and really talking about similar issues tells me we're gonna get to a good finish, but, you know, we'll have to wait and see. I'm not gonna negotiate with you. So.
Because you'd win.
I'm not so sure.
But, say early childhood scholarships, that's a Republican issue in the past. Is that something that's potentially in a?
Certainly, we will consider it. We made a list of all the different things that we thought, is this something that we need to take a look at? Senator Rosen visited with all the chairs about are there areas that some were missed or that we may need to do something, and so that's the great conversation that we're having now.
The tax cuts that you rolled out last week, do you know how much those are going to cost and how much of this surplus, how big a percentage those are?
I do. I can give you, well, within the ballpark, I don't have the tax chair here, but Section 179, the ag and small business expense relief, was somewhere near 140 to 150 million in the first year, and then it went down to like 10 or 15 million after that, and we can try to give you the exact number on that. Exempting all of the Social Security income was around 400 million, and that would continue near that number. The rest of them I can't give the details. Some of them are quite small, but those are two of the big ones.
The income tax cut?
I don't have the numbers on that.
The governor and the speakers say that only a small fraction of Minnesotans currently pay taxes on Social Security income anyway. Do you agree, disagree?
Well, like I said last time, if you, as a married couple, are above 60,000, you start paying some of your Social Security is taxed. And so is there a way that we can make sure that it's fully exempt? Well, I think we can. I think that's the direction we're going to aim. I think seniors, when they hear that we want to fully exempt it, all of them give us the thumbs up.
I can jump in on that too. You know, when I was speaker, we raised the limit of what was exempted on Social Security, and we thought that was a big step. We didn't, at the time, have the money to do it completely, and we couldn't get agreement from the Democrats to do it completely. But we can afford it now, and frankly, we're one of a very few states that taxes Social Security income. And this isn't a time to pit one group of people against another. This is a time to do something that's right for those that are either in retirement age or nearing retirement age. We shouldn't be taxing Social Security income. It's bad public policy. And frankly, those seniors could use that additional money in their family budgets. So we feel pretty strongly about that. We can afford to do it now in this, and frankly, we should get it done.
Just to be clear, I believe it's 491 million that to go back into the rainy day fund. Do you guys support doing that?
So the reserves will be full all the way till, I believe, July of 2021 if we do nothing. So the governor is talking about making sure that it stays at that number and doing legislation this year. That will be the conversation that we're going to have. The other direction we could go is as we have surpluses, it just begins to fill up again. And so we do believe that it's wise for Minnesota to make sure that there's a rainy day fund, that it's in an economic downturn, we're ready for it. But there's also some other priorities that we want to weigh out. Is it more important to get Social Security fully exempted, for example, is something we want to at least have a conversation about.
Because you're not committing to that in
Correct.
the future at this point. And with regard to Social Security, 400 million a year, very quickly, and according to the tales of this forecast, we no longer have a deficit, especially if you include inflation. No longer have a surplus, especially if you include inflation. And so obviously, you know what, well, I've just given the Democrats point on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, and we haven't used inflation for decades and decades, and frankly, if you look at the overall growth of government, it has grown quite a bit above inflation. So I say we want to make sure that we're watching our spending too. That's part of our responsibility as the legislative body and the governor, is make sure that we're not overspending. That's our side of that story.
Mr.
But
Leader.
on that point, sorry, excuse me, the rigidity that these tax cuts would imply, the fact that it is not a one-time measure, but that it's an ongoing commitment, what does that mean in terms of even factors like the coronavirus, if that in fact flares up to be a bigger deal than what is currently projected?
So our budget is over $48 billion, and we make choices every day and every year about where we spend money and where we provide tax relief. And if the coronavirus is more than we think it's going to be, we will find resources. I'm not worried about that at all. But to give tax relief to seniors, we think is a high priority. As we mentioned, only 13 states tax Social Security income, so I'd like to be one of the states that does not do that. The House Republicans agree, and if we can work towards getting the governor and the speaker to agree with us, we'll get that done.
Mr. Leader, along that same area, the governor said he has a lot of concerns about the tails in terms of tax cuts and possibly forcing the state into a deficit situation in the future, because your tax cuts would be a permanent or ongoing tail.
Yes.
How do you respond to that?
I have a lot of concern about the ongoing spending increases that automatically happen, and how do we control our spending. And so there's two sides of that equation, tax relief and spending, revenue coming in, versus spending going out. And we are concerned about the spending. If you look at where we were, I believe in the beginning of Governor Dayton's time, we were at somewhere around 34 billion. Now we're getting ready to hit 50 billion. And so how do we watch our spending is what we're going to push. And the two sides collide, and that's where we have to figure out, what is the solution moving forward. I do believe we'll find a solution. Just like last year, we passed a 2-year budget that balanced and took care of all of our needs, and we provided tax relief then. We got a middle-class income tax bracket cut for the first time in almost 2 decades. So we can do more of that while we balance a budget.
In the bonding area, the governor said plenty of money for a robust bonding bill. He's used that term before. Asked him, can we go over the $2 billion? He said, well, we might be able to stretch. We'd like them, in other words, I assume Republicans, to listen to that. And Speaker Hortman is saying a number, but the number they're tossing around as my voice goes out here. What is that any possibility to get anywhere near what the governor's talking about?
We're going to find a spot that we can all agree on, and we're all committed to that. We've never had a general obligation bonding bill over $1 billion. They're proposing $2 billion and $3.5 billion. And so we're gonna find a number that we can all agree on, and I think you'll find all 4 leaders working together and then working with the governor after that. But there is a lot of dialogue among the House and Senate, Democrats, Republicans, to work towards a good bonding bill for Minnesota. You should expect it to get done early, and the number, we'll just have to wait and see.
Will it be somewhere between 1 and 2? I mean, is that,
Those are the 2 numbers.
Obviously, they need our votes to get this out of the House, and the bonding bill has to start in the House. So, I've been very vocal that we're not setting a hard and fast limit on what it should be. But just to put it into perspective, the bonding bill, the biennial average for bonding is about $1 billion for almost the last 20 years. So for us to go to $2 billion, to double the biennial average, or $3.5 billion, and I'll remind you that the House proposal is $3.5 billion in general obligation bonds and another $700 million in cash. So $4.2 billion. I mean, we're talking about multiple times what the biennial average has been. What we care more about is what the projects are. We want to make sure that we're investing in the infrastructure that Minnesotans think is important: transportation infrastructure, water infrastructure, taking care of our state assets, our buildings, those sorts of things. We want to put together a bill that has a good mix of those things and regionally important infrastructure that Minnesotans can get behind. And I would look for a bill more in that based on what's in it. As far as the number itself, is there a chance we could go above $1 billion? There is a chance we could. Is there a chance it's near $2 billion? Probably not.
Senator Gazelka, there was a stark report from the OLA about corrections yesterday. You may not have seen it yet. It's not scheduled yet for a Senate Judiciary hearing. However, it tells us that we don't know how safe prisons are. We know that there's sexual misconduct toward female employees. We know that there's violence. We know that there's a culture of bullying. We just don't know to what degree those things exist. And it's calling for a massive increase in spending to produce data so that those things can be assessed and safety can be implemented. Is that something you could see investing in this year with this budget?
So I have not read the report, but I do appreciate the Office of the Legislative Auditor, and we will look at that. I'm sure Senator Limmer will look at that. We're not ruling out all spending, and so we're taking a look at each one separately, and certainly public safety is a big area that we're talking about, and we'll take a sincere look.
We gotta go, he's got a briefing on coronavirus.
I just want to chime in on this one quickly. You know, it has been, you know, the Corrections Department has asked for more money and more money to add on and build new prisons. We have a prison in Appleton, Minnesota that is state-of-the-art, that is certified and ready to take inmates right now, and it's sitting empty, completely empty. So our position has been, and I hope it continues to be, that before we spend more money on bricks and mortar, adding on to prisons, that we take advantage of an asset that I think the state could acquire at pennies on the dollar probably, and utilize that facility. And it would also bring much needed jobs back to an area that lost a lot of jobs when that prison was closed. So
Seems a little peripheral to the issue that they're identifying.
well, I read the Pioneer Press article on the front page today that said that they're asking for all kinds of money to improve the Stillwater prison. So if I got that wrong, I apologize, but they're asking for money to build prisons, and hopefully before they do that, they'll take advantage of the prisons that we already have that are sitting empty in the state of Minnesota.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to make that point.